Hello and welcome to 3D modeling video number 54. In this video we'll continue learning about normal maps, and we will go ahead and unwrap the low polygon model, and we'll start baking the high polygon details into a texture map. So here is my low polygon on top of the high polygon. They're intersecting, which means that we have a nice match. In my previous videos on normal maps, I have used three methods to create the low poly. The first method is to take the high poly and reduce its geometry. The second is to insert primitives in place of the high polygon, and the third is using the freeform modeling tools and placing the high poly on top of the low poly on top of the high poly. So anyways, right now it is at 1806 triangles. So is that good or bad? Well, it depends on several factors. It depends on what kind of platform you're aiming for, PC, console, or mobile. It depends on what scene you have. If this is an outdoor environment or an indoor environment, you can pack a lot more detail into the detail in an indoor environment is much more dense because it's a smaller environment, so you can pack a lot more in there. Whereas in an outdoor environment, you have to spread your geometry out carefully so you won't have too much. It depends on the importance of your object. Will this be just a small prop that's just laying on the ground, or will it be something that the character is holding and looking at closely? One thing to keep in mind is that you want to eliminate geometry in places that are not seen. For example, in this piece right here, if I isolate it, you can see there's geometry on the bottom, which is not necessary, so I'm going to just go ahead and delete it using my bi-angle feature. I'll click here and simply delete it. So this is an example of floating geometry because it's not connected to the cylinder. It's floating up above here. And the main thing you want to focus on when you're creating your low poly is the silhouette, and making sure you have enough geometry to get those nice curves that you would like. And you can see here on the bottom, it's just a minimum geometry because this area is not as important as the silhouette. And if you want a nicer silhouette here, you can dedicate some more geometry here to smooth out that curve. You should, if you're working professionally, you should go ahead and ask your programmers and your directors what kind of triangle count you should be aiming for. And we have this piece right here. You can see that if I make this transparent, Alt-X, you can see that there's geometry on the inside here, and I might not need that, so I can go ahead and perhaps delete that. So I can delete this geometry in the middle because it will not be necessary. It will be blocked by other geometry, so we don't really need it. So I can go ahead and delete that and do the same for this side. And as you can see, it is being hidden by this piece of geometry here, so it's not really important for us to have geometry there. Same for this right here. You can see that inside, on the inside, there is no geometry here because it will never be seen, so what is the point of wasting geometry on there? However, if this piece, if this object had pieces that would need to be taken off or rotated, then you would need to go ahead and put some geometry there. So, you know, it's always a good idea to check your geometry and make sure you're being as efficient as possible. Making sure you do not have any geometry in places that do not need it. So, if you want the actual poly count, triangle count, it will probably be this much. So now I have 1838 triangles. So let's go ahead and start the unwrapping process. I'll go ahead and isolate every single object, and I'll unwrap their UVWs individually, and then we will combine them and do the final layout for the UVs. So I'll go ahead and use the unwrap UV modifier. Select face. I'll turn off ignore back facing. I like to use thin seam display, and I'll click on turn show map scene off. So first I'll start with the bottom. I'll go ahead and select this area, and I'll click on first I'll make it visible. and I'll select the quick planar map. Then I can use tools and relax to relax it, because right now it's mapping directly upwards, which means it's giving us a very flat result here. We need to stretch this out so we can have more texture space. There you go. You can use relax by face angles or relax by edge angles. I find that face angles work a lot better. You can increase the iterations and the amount to have it work faster. You can use keep boundary points fixed, and that will keep your boundary in the same location. It will simply relax on the insides. And once you're done, I'm going to go ahead and hold shift and click and drag it off to the side. Now I'm going to go ahead and select this part. I'm going to click on cylindrical. Now you see it adds a cylindrical gizmo, but it's not perfect in its positioning. So click right here onto best align, and it will align that as closely as it can with the actual selection. You can also use fit, and then I'm going to click on the cylindrical again to turn it off, and here is this. Move it off to the side. Sometimes you will get these kinds of green lines, which means that it's not properly welded. So what I can do is I can switch to vertices, select these vertices. Right here is the weld threshold. I can click on tools and weld selected. And now you can see that those green lines on the inside disappear, which means that all the vertices are properly welded. Alright, now it's time for the most complex part, the top. Okay, so one thing that's important to keep in mind, smoothing groups. Whenever you have whenever polygons and triangles are divided by a sharp angle here, you will want these two pieces to have different smoothing groups. Or in this case, this whole object, this whole part is one smoothing group, but then we want this part inside here, as well as all the other ones, to have a different smoothing group. So the general rule of thumb is, if you have different smoothing groups, you should have different UV islands, UV sections. However, just because you have different UV sections does not mean you need a different smoothing group. Case in point, these two objects, these two islands right here, are two different UV islands, two different sections, but they can still have one single smoothing group. However, in this case, you can tell by the shading that, well, I will fix the smoothing groups later, but basically if you have different smoothing groups, you should have different sections, UV islands. So I can go ahead and use the planar angle tools, maybe set it to something higher like 30, and I can use that to select multiple polygons at the same time. I'll go ahead and select that, and then I'll go ahead and select this. And one quick way of unwrapping is I'm going to go ahead and select the top, deselect, and I can use mapping, flatten mapping. And what this will do is that it will look at the angles of your selected geometry and just kind of quickly unwrap them. And this might be a nice solution if you want to save time. Sometimes, however, it segments it too much. So it might not always be the best solution. So I'll select these faces here, and then select these faces. Click on Quick Planar Map. Maybe I can use Y or X. So what that has done is it has gone and unwrapped it from the x-axis. So it's basically taken them and made them flat according to the x-axis. The problem is that it has overlapped them. So I will click and drag and move it away from each other. And let's see if I need to relax it just a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the same for all of these faces that are at a sharp angle, that all require their separate smoothing groups, or different smoothing groups from the surrounding smoothing groups. You can see in this case the X option was a bad idea because it just kind of flattened it out, because it's doing it from the X-axis, but the X-axis, these polygons have no X-axis faces here, so it gave us these straight lines. So let's try the Y-axis quick planar map. Now it's giving us better results, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure they don't overlap. However, there is a faster way of making sure they don't overlap, and I will show you that later. It looks like flattened mapping has given us good results with these pieces, so that's good. And let's see what else. Okay, we also got these right here, and that needs X. There we go. Alright, now let's see, what is this piece right here? Okay, so this piece will have one smoothing group, the same as the bottom part, and perhaps I can simply use average normals, maybe relax a little bit. There you go. Maybe I can use the keep boundary points fixed option. There you go. Okay, now we just need to do a quick check. I'm going to select inverted faces. These faces have been inverted because of our editing. So now I'm just going to go click on Tools, Flip Horizontal, and now do it again. There are no more inverted faces. Now I'm going to click on Select Overlapped Faces, and there are no overlapped faces. An overlapping face is basically something like this. They are now overlapping, so if I click on select overlapped faces, it's now telling me that these faces are overlapped, and we don't want that. However, there are cases where you want the faces to overlap. Sometimes, to be as efficient as possible with textures, you want to use a mirrored texture, and that simply means that the texture on the right side is the same as on the left side. In that case, the faces here in the UV editor will be inverted and overlapping, but that's okay because you want to save on texture space as much as possible, and I'll talk more about that later. But that's something we do to try and keep the game running as fast as possible and keep it as efficient as possible. Okay, so now that we have this, later on I will show you a nice tool for arranging these UVs. For now, we're just going to move them off to the side. There's no overlapping, there's no inverted polygons, faces, so we're good here. And I'm going to make a new material. I'm going to go ahead and click on diffuse, select checker, make the tiling like 20 by 20, apply, and let's see, show hardware map in viewport. So there we go, and this is simply a way of letting me know that I have already unwrapped this part. Alright, so the rest of it should go by much faster. That was the hardest one. Let's go ahead and work on this one. For this one, we can just speed up the process. We can just click on mapping, flatten mapping. That should be good enough for this. We can play around with the settings, maybe set it to 25. Okay, let me see what that number was. Probably a little bit too high. Okay, so I will probably have separate normal maps, I mean smoothing groups for this section here, so it might be a good idea to separate them. So separate. So I can click on Tools, Break, move that off to the side. And do the same for the other side. Tools, Break, move it off. And let's see, this will also have probably a separate smoothing group. So I will select Tools, Break, and the same for this side. Tools, Break. Alright, let's do a quick check. Select inverted faces, nothing. Select overlapped faces, nothing. So I think this is good. Let's see, this might also need a separate smoothing group, but it's already separate. So we're good here. Let's work on this section here. Go ahead and go to mapping, flatten mapping, see what this gives us. This can be a problem because it gives us these little pieces right here. Let's try a higher number. That gives us better results. Let's check for any errors. Select inverted faces, nothing. Select overlapped faces, nothing. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, so this will be a separate piece, separate smoothing group. So I'll just go ahead and Tools, Break. Tools, Break. Let me see, this will also probably have a separate smoothing group. I'm just making sure they're not connected to anything else. Tools, Break. Tools, Break. Okay. And let's go ahead and work on this part. Let's go ahead and start with the what I'll do. So I'll go ahead and select the middle. Let me see, plus to make it grow. Alright, use the cylindrical. You can see it gives us the cylinder here by default is in this orientation. So let's click on best align. And that gives that aligns, rotates the cylinder and aligns it to the position here. Gives us this result. Okay, let's go ahead and select the vertices, tools, weld selected. So there we go. Now I will press Ctrl I and I will change it to, let's see, X. There we go. Now move them off to the side so they don't overlap. Select inverted faces, and we do have some because these faces are fine, but these are inverted. So we'll click on Tools, Mirror Horizontal. And now we should be all good. There we go. And this is done. And let's see. Cylindrical. Best align. There we go. Change that to Z. Actually, we should select this as well. All right. So select inverted, tools, mirror horizontal, select overlapped faces. Okay, and I think we're good here as well. We might be able to relax these faces a bit. Just a little bit. Okay, and we're good here. Let's see, although if I was planning to have a separate smoothing group here, it would probably be a good idea to separate that as well. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and select this and this, and tools, break that off. There we go. And let's go ahead and separate these as well, this from this. Tools, break. Alright. This is a really easy one. And this one is pretty easy as well. These will have probably different smoothing groups. Might have to do a little bit of relaxing here. Tools, relax. There we go. Select inverted faces, select overlapped. Okay. Alright. Now we just got one more piece left to go right here. And this will probably have smoothing groups, different smoothing groups, so we have to keep that in mind. Okay, so that's surprising. There are no inverted faces, no overlapped faces, so we're good here as well. So that was the unwrapping process. Next time we'll go ahead and fix up the UV maps, combine them all together, and we can start baking. Thank you for watching and take care.